There was a neighbor that used to live on the same street as me back in 2018. His name was Bob, and he does his night shift at Walmart as a security guard, mainly just to make sure nobody was breaking into the Walmart and stuff. Sure, cops were patrolling the areas and that, but however, though, he mainly was used to it. He eventually made his few rounds around the place at Walmart, but as a security guard, it was something he never expected to see. It was just outside of the store. So, to give it a bit of background information, he was living with his girlfriend at the time of the story. So, Bob and his girlfriend were doing lots of great things, but of course, they were struggling. That meant that Bob had to get a second job, so he started getting a second job at a security guard in a Walmart. It was during the night shift, so of course he had to take the opportunity to take a day to help out. As unfortunately, though, when when it becomes to be the case, Bob had to take an extra shift since the other security guard called in sick. He was just walking around the Walmart plaza. Of course, he had the keys to get into Walmart. He walked in, but he eventually beginning to hear some strange sounds coming from one of the back of the store. He got closer to what it was. It was an eerie cackling sound that sent a chill down his spine. He peered around the corner to see if there was anyone that could be still in the Walmart, but eventually he saw what looked like an insane-looking woman in her mid-30s standing in the middle of the store. She was muttering something to herself and wildly gesticulating, but of course, Bob didn't even know what it was or who this woman was, but she didn't look like anyone he had recognized. Just as he was about to go and get help, the woman broke into a sprint towards the exit, screaming loudly. Bob eventually got ahead and tracked her down. As soon as the police were called, as he alerted them, they eventually arrested the woman, and the cop and explained to Bob that the woman, who is mentally ill patient, had recently got off her medications. Eventually, that would explain why she broke in the Walmart. How she got a key to get into Walmart, that is a good question, as Bob had no idea why that would be the case. However, for after this night shift, Bob didn't even have ever incidents, but this is something he would never forget. As time went on, he eventually quit his job as a security guard, as he never once wanted to do another night shift again. And still to this day, he doesn't ever plan to. So, this happened to a friend of mine who used to live on the same street as me until she moved in 2014. Her name was Mary, and she was about 15 years old. She was a high school student and was on her sophomore year, but of course, it was coming to a close as she was going to be in sophomore since it was pretty much her summer break. So eventually, when it was going on, everybody was getting ready, doing their back to school shopping. Eventually, most weekends, Mary's parents took her to Walmart, but eventually it was getting closer to when school was about to start again. So her parents had took Mary to Walmart so they can get some stuff such as school supplies. Eventually, they walked around the store, and Mary eventually decides to use the bathroom. However, she went to the nearest one and unexpectedly heard a faint but distant whispers coming from the stalls. Mary stopped in her tracks, wondering what this could be, although there was nobody in the stall except for a woman who walked past her. The whispers began to sound a little bit more clearer, as there were voices of spirits that were somewhat what really weirded out. It was somewhat looked as if it was been heard within the walls of Walmart, and had been there for years, it felt like. Eventually, Mary ended up using the bathroom, and just as she was washing her hands, The voices pleaded her for some help out of the walls, but she couldn't really make out what it was, and she couldn't even see anyone in the bathroom. Mary had listened to the voices, and she realized that they had to be somewhat shouting or something because there was nobody there. She eventually told her parents about those things that she's been hearing in the bathroom. They just basically lectured her and said that she must be imagining things. But still to this day, nothing is known about why there were voices there or what was making them. Mary still hears the voices when she visits the Walmart's bathroom stalls, but each time it seems like the voices were a little quieter, as if they were slowly fading away into thin air. Now, whatever Mary had been sensing or hearing one of those times when she was in the Walmart bathroom was pretty much completely paranormal. This happened to one of my mom's friends. At the time, her name was Kathy. It was during the summertime when Kathy was about 17, was going with her mom to Walmart. Of course, Walmart was a pretty nice place, and Kathy was getting stuff for high school, mainly for her final year. However, as they reached the checkout area, Kathy noticed that there was a stranger that approached a young kid. The stranger was a strange looking man who smiled at the child in a creepy way. He looked like he was in his late 20s, and she immediately looked at him, having an uneasy feeling. The man started speaking to a young child who was about maybe 7 or 8. He seemed very friendly and told her he had brought her a gift and asked her to come with him if she wanted it. Of course, the kid was confused, but she looked back to see that her mom was further away by the crowd. Of course, this is when the young girl followed the stranger out of the Walmart. At this point, Kathy ended up looking over to see that the stranger was walking out. Eventually, at that moment, this is when the mom stepped down and said, "Hey, what are you doing with my kid?" The kidnapper basically put down the child and said, "Oh, I was just looking for his mom." Eventually, as the stranger said that, he eventually walked away, jumped into the car, and sped off. What really confused Kathy was, why was this man trying to take a child? It eventually was learned from the police officer that this man, who had been somewhat doing this to other places in different cities, of course, this was something that really disturbed her. Of course, this stranger has been known to luring kids with gifts and stuff, but eventually he had been caught. This honestly comes to show Kathy that anybody can be snatched up at any moment. All it takes is one thing to happen. Eventually, Kathy stopped going to that Walmart for at least a little while, but eventually it wasn't pretty. But at the same time, the kid was finally safe. Kathy had no idea what this man had intentions, but she had a feeling his intentions were not good. So this was around maybe a few years ago, and this happened to some people that happened to used to go to my school. At the time, her name was Nina, and she was a really really good good high school student. Her grades were high, and she was very amazing, and she really enjoyed it. Eventually, though, all they can really do was just doing all the stuff. Eventually, when it happened, it was on Black Friday. It was Black Friday, and at the time, Nina was getting some stuff for her parents for at least Walmart. Eventually, she had her mom's credit card, and her mom had said to her that she could buy anything that she wanted, as long pretty much as she does not go over a certain budget, which of course Nina no really liked it. Eventually, the Walmart store that she'd been waiting outside was pretty much packed with a line of people trying to get in as the best deals that were on Black Friday. Black Friday was usually had been chaotic, but of course Nina had begun the dread of setting in foot in the store. Facing now, this really happens to be something. I think around 7 or 8, the doors finally opened and everyone started running in like zombies, trying to get the best deals. Of course, there were some people fighting over for best deal on a game or whatever, but Nina found a few gifts that she would like for her parents. As she was getting that, she was going around looking at other places when all of a sudden she heard what sounded like guns of a fire. This honestly really made her jump as she never heard the sound of a gunfire. Keep in mind that this was in California. I can't remember which Walmart in California it was, but it was somewhere around there. And since this was 2018, eventually Nina looked around, thinking that there could be someone there, but it wasn't. People were running around in blind panic with screams of horror filling the air. Of course, it was chaos as the sound of gunfire was echoing. Nina ended up feeling like something was going on. She eventually ran and started hiding at places with her stuff. Eventually, though, she was hiding behind the electronics aisle of the Walmart. However, the large store like Walmart, there was obviously pretty big for it. Eventually, what Nina got a glimpse of was a man. He seemed to be maybe in his late 40s, and he had what seemed to be a rifle. Not really a rifle, but auto rifle, but kind of like a little Uzi or something. He was looking around, and he was basically almost shooting at least a bunch of people. There were a couple of dead bodies in there, which Mina did her best not to make a sound, as she didn't want to alert the person who was doing the shooting. Eventually, Mina ended up hearing more of the sound of the gunfire coming. She kept herself hiding as best she could. No one seemed to understand where the shooting was coming from, or who was really behind it. But eventually, Mina stayed where she was, and she thought that maybe something could badly happen. To her horror, she looked to see the man that was on the same aisle. Of course, she was looking, and eventually, she didn't even know what this guy was doing. He ended up looking over, and eventually the cops arrived, and they placed the man under arrest. Mina was eventually escorted out after paying for the stuff with the cop's safety. Eventually, while leaving the store, Mina can see there was pretty much a store filled with broken glass, scared customers, even some blood, and people who were all dead. All they pretty much was doing was just looking at everything. Mina had never went to Walmart again on Black Friday, and she doesn't ever plan to go back there. Ever since this experience, it made her afraid that what would happen on Black Friday could happen again. This was only been a few years ago, and still to this day, this still really gives her frightened chills every time she thinks about it.